All right, so our topic is, are birds living dinosaurs? And a good place to start is the scriptures. Colossians chapter 2, verses 6 to 8 says, "As ye therefore have received Christ Jesus the Lord, walk ye in him, rooted and built up in him, and established in the faith, as ye have been taught, abounding therein with thanksgiving. Beware, lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ." And the issue is a matter of worldview or philosophy when we come to a topic like this: are birds living dinosaurs? Many people would possibly say, well, it doesn't really matter. It actually does, because it's a whole world philosophy behind it. Now I have a little fossil here. When I purchased this, the person I purchased it from was still a friend, so that's good. But it was sold to me on the basis of it's a dinosaur. I wasn't quite sure, but I thought a pocket dinosaur would be excellent, because I really like my fossils to be able to travel so I can use them for teaching people. A little pocket dinosaur. Get a lot of those on the ark, wouldn't you, if that was the size? So is it a bird? Is it a dinosaur? Is it something else? Well, means we need to know what are dinosaurs. You ask a child, I'm sure they know what a dinosaur is. Adults, a bit harder. So originally dinosaurs were called dragons until the term dinosauria or dinosaurs was invented by Richard Owens. Did that in 1841, and then it was first in published material in the next year, 1842. And the name means fearfully great reptile. And Richard Owens defined dinosaurs as reptiles that walked erect, having a posture similar to that of elephants and rhinoceroses, with their legs under their body. So here's a Brachiosaurus model, and he's got his legs under his body. It's like us, we have our legs under our body. So that sort of posture is excellent for bearing weight. A reptile that we see today, like a crocodile or a lizard, they have their legs out to the side. It's like somebody doing a push-up. And I'm not sure how many people you can have on your back when you are doing push-ups, but you know the structure's not as strong as if you had your arms underneath. But we can't do that because of the way we're designed. But dinosaurs have their legs, whether it's 4 legs or good old T-Rex, the 2 legs. His legs would have been in closer under the body. It's a key thing that Richard Owens saw and helped define what is a dinosaur. So, a dinosaur. So, quite amazing really. He had basically 3 dinosaurs to work with. They happened to be 3 major divisions of dinosaurs, which was very important. And he came up with a lot of structural evidence. Now, this is a replica of a real one, of a T-Rex head, half size. So one from America. You can see some of the characteristics. And one of the things in defining a dinosaur is the holes in the head. It made the head much lighter rather than solid skull like we tend to have. In the eye sockets, there was something before, something after, and that helped define a dinosaur. And when you think of this type of dinosaur, the sauropod, with a huge long neck, if you had a heavy head, it's going to have a problem just walking. So God designed them in the beginning with a lot of mass-saving attributes. So the holes in the head help define what is a dinosaur, right? So you've got your good old T-Rex as a good example. And then they had other things about how their legs hinged. We tend to be able to pivot more on our legs, whereas a dinosaur would have been able to walk largely in one direction. Very hard for them to turn, whereas we've got a lot more mobility. The hole in their pelvis was very important. The last point there, 3 or more sacral vertebrae, very important in defining a dinosaur. So if you look at up here, Harry Seeley, 1888, divided dinosaurs into 2 groups. So we have the Ornithischia, which are the top one there, had a particular structure with those pelvic bones, and then the Saurothia had a slight variation. And the top one, Ornithischia, was the bird-hipped. And the interesting thing is that when we come down to the 5 groups of dinosaurs, such as the theropod, the first one, like a T-Rex, or the large sauropods, like this Brachiosaurus type model, and then the armoured ones like Stegosaurus and the other ones as well. The top 2 were the ones that had the lizard-hipped structures, these ones, and the bottom 3 had bird-hipped structures. And interestingly enough, the evolutionists have picked on the lizard-hipped ones, not the bird-hipped ones, to be the ancestors of birds. So all of a sudden you've got a red flag flying. It doesn't make sense. We see nothing in the fossil record that tells us that any dinosaur can change its hip type in evolution or anything. So we've had a brief introduction to dinosaurs, so we know what a dinosaur sort of is. So then we need to know, what is a bird? So go to Wikipedia, a great source of information. It's actually improved over the years because it does get a bit of vetting. Early on, anybody could write anything, but now there's a lot more editing going on. So birds are a group of warm-blooded vertebrates constituting the class Aves, characterised by feathers, toothless beaked jaws, the laying of hard-shelled eggs, a high metabolic rate, a 4-chambered heart, and a strong yet lightweight skeleton. And there are over 11,000 living species. So birds have wings, typically, whose development varies according to the species. The only known groups without wings are the moa and the elephant bird. So how do they get into birds? Well, interesting. And then you've got penguins, of course, which are birds. They have sort of flippers rather than wings. So it does get a little more complicated, but largely we know the essential things about birds. And wings are modified forelimbs, so their top limbs gave birds the ability to fly, although further evolution has led to the loss of flight in some birds. So how do you fit in emus and ostriches and things like that? The digestive and respiratory systems of birds are also uniquely adapted for flight. And Archaeopteryx is, or was, the oldest true bird. So, what are birds? Well, we have a collection of birds that are common to Adelaide and many other places. So, in general, we're pretty good at spotting what is a bird. So, back to the fossil I started with. Is it a bird? Is it a dinosaur, or is it something completely else? So if you look at it, it doesn't have wings. So it doesn't look like a bird, has a very long neck, long tail, looks reptilian. So it could be a dinosaur, but you look at the legs, the limbs of it, and they're skewed out to the side. Either it got squashed really, really flat, and these legs went out sideways, or more likely, it doesn't have its legs under its body, so therefore it's not a dinosaur by definition. It's a lizard. And so I sent in an inquiry to the Australian Museum in Sydney there, and I'm happy with the answer. It's a hypothallus, found in China only, but it loves water. It's a swimming reptile. It's a land reptile, but it loves to swim as well. It's like a water dragon, basically. But it's a little tiny thing. Still very nice for putting in your pocket and carrying around all over the place, but unfortunately not a dinosaur. So we can work some things out like that. What is a dinosaur? What is a bird? But the idea that birds are living dinosaurs is very widely promoted. So we go back to Colossians 2 verse 8, beware. And when it's saying beware, we need to beware. Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world and not after Christ. So we need to be careful about what we expose ourselves to, what we expose our children to. So we go along to a museum like the Melbourne Museum, and off the website I read this: meet the modern dinosaurs. Every bird in the sky today evolved from a group of dinosaurs known as theropods, like this one. His forelimbs are not very well developed. Now, over the millions of years, birds have adapted to live in almost every habitat on Earth. So this is Struthiomimus, a theropod. Up there, they've got some sort of representation of that. You only ever have bones, of course. And of course, the other thing I recognise is a duck. And it just says that, and a modern descendant of the theropods, the duck. So Melbourne Museum gives one story. Birds are living dinosaurs. You go to the Australian Fossil and Mineral Museum at Bathurst, over there in New South Wales, you find the same story. It's got really good collection of minerals and some really good fossils and a nice T-Rex replica. But as soon as you walk in, you're hit with this, which is, did you know dinosaurs are not extinct? More than 10,000 species of the dinosaurs are still alive today. They are birds. And particularly aimed at children, there's a whole section there, really well developed. And it says, do you already have a pet dinosaur? If you have a pet bird, you have a living dinosaur. So you don't even have to get into the Adelaide Museum there, the South Australian Museum. Before you get there, on the lawn out there, there's a little wall and a plaque on it, and it reads, please don't feed the dinosaurs. That's right, pigeons, like all birds, are modern-day dinosaurs. Want proof? Look at a bird's skeleton and compare it to dinosaur fossils. You'll see a lot of similarities. Feeding the dinosaurs encourages them to harass the cafe patrons. And that's bad and it's bad for their health too. So please don't feed the dinosaurs. And you go into other natural history museums around the world, just this one from London, for example, and you'll read very similar things. It's an unlikely relationship, but the humble pigeon is a descendant of the group of dinosaurs that also included the mighty T-Rex or Tyrannosaurus rex. The two species share a remarkable biological past. Birds that fill the world's skies today are living dinosaurs, reminders of a distant and strange past. Many features and behaviours that characterise living birds were also found in their dinosaur ancestors. Perhaps most surprisingly of all was the discovery of dinosaurs with feathers. So that's Deinonychus, with feathers all over it in its representation to bring home the message, dinosaurs are living birds. Then if you go into a lot of scientific literature, you'll find it, just one article here. In 2021, BirdLife International reported in a scientific paper produced by Roger Benson under the title, "It's Official, Birds Are Literally Dinosaurs. Here's How We Know." Benson wrote, there's no longer really any doubt that birds are a type of dinosaur. These days, the debate is about details. The strong evidence doesn't just come from fossilised bones and similarities found across the skeleton, but from fossilised soft tissue, especially feathers. Many dinosaurs had not just some kind of body covering, but distinctive bird-like feathers. So, it's official. Birds are literally dinosaurs. It's pretty obvious the case is closed from his perspective. And that's a very popular idea. But the reality is that the idea is still actually currently debated. And if the idea of birds evolving from dinosaurs is so widely promoted and accepted in society, then why do Bible-believing creationists oppose this idea? Is it because they're just anti-science? Well, it might come as a surprise to some that not all evolutionists even supported this concept of birds being living dinosaurs. And the idea of dinosaur to bird evolution is actually still widely debated. And so there are three major views on it. Firstly, that birds have evolved from dinosaurs. Secondly, birds have evolved but not from dinosaurs. And the third group believe that birds and dinosaurs were both created. They're distinct elements or entities or species or kinds, and there is no evolution. So if we have a look at the first point of view, birds have evolved from dinosaurs. So evolutionists believe that birds evolved from land creatures but are divided into two broad groups. One supports the cursorial origin of flight, meaning from the ground up, where bird flight evolved from a group from dinosaurs like this one running and just being able to fly eventually. This one I don't think would get off the ground, I'm sure. The other group supports the arboreal origin or treetop down approach, where birds evolved from gliding from trees. So Thomas Huxley, known as Darwin's bulldog, was the first known to propose that birds have evolved from dinosaurs, and in just 1868, just 9 years after Charles Darwin published his infamous On the Origin of the Species book, evolutionists led by Huxley were already asserting that birds evolved from dinosaurs. And Huxley stated, "Tiny dinosaurs with long hind legs passed by degrees into ancient flightless birds, and these via Archaeopteryx kin into the songbirds heralding today's dawn." And then a little later, in 1879, Samuel Wendell Wollaston proposed that birds evolved from running creatures that made short jumps. Supposedly wings helped them make longer jumps, and long jumps turned into flight. That's serious. You laugh, and I laugh, but it's serious. Archaeopteryx was promoted as a missing link between birds and reptiles for over a century. You imagine how much damage was done. But it's regarded widely now as just an ancient bird, fully formed bird. Alan Fiducia, he's an evolutionist. He's a world authority on birds, an ornithologist. He wrote in his book, The Origin and evolution of birds, paleontologists have tried to turn Archaeopteryx into an earthbound feathered dinosaur. But it's not. It's a bird. It's a perching bird. And no amount of paleobabble is going to change that. And in the 1970s, John Ostrom was prominent in discussion with his discovery of Deinonychus. Said Deinonychus's sickle-like claw and its bird-like carpal were claimed to be intermediate structures between fast-running land creatures and flying birds. Then in 1986, Jacques Gauthier presented a model where he argued that theropod dinosaurs evolved into birds. His paper was pivotal in justifying the idea that theropods evolved into birds. And Gauthier's model relegated Archaeopteryx, which was the oldest known bird at the time, to a side branch in the evolution of flight. And this is now the consensus held by most evolutionists. Archaeopteryx has got nothing to do with modern birds. And although Archaeopteryx is flight capable, it's no longer regarded as ancestral to the line that led to modern birds, but it is a bird. And then there's Xing Shu from China. He's a prominent dino-to-bird evolutionist. He claims to have found more feathered dinosaurs than anyone else in the whole world. Now, going back to that article earlier, and Richard Benson, the people who were in that article asked this question: what would you say to people that would say birds aren't dinosaurs? And Roger Benson's answer was, if birds aren't dinosaurs, then we have no idea what they are. Birds share so many features with theropods, and there are no other candidate fossil groups. When you understand that birds are a type of dinosaur, that the evidence is stacked up, everything starts to make more sense. Birds inherit their bipedalism, walking on two legs, from theropods, explaining why they evolved from flight using just their forelimbs, unlike bats and pterosaurs. If that hypothesis was wrong, we'd expect to be just as uncertain about bird origins today as 30 years ago. So from Benson's point of view, he's clutching at straws. If dinosaurs aren't the ancestors to birds, I've got no idea how birds arose. From a creationist point of view, it's pretty obvious how birds arose. But we'll come to that a little later. And why don't they use bats? Well, bats use all four limbs, or all limbs, with the skin stretched between them. So birds don't do that. Pterosaurs do the same thing. Their wings involve all four limbs. So they're saying, well, it can't be them. Well, it was a better option than this fellow being the ancestor of birds. But in any case, I'm not going to argue with them. So the second group then, birds have evolved but not from dinosaurs. So the evolutionists opposed to birds evolving from dinosaurs support the arboreal origin, or treetop down approach, where birds evolve by gliding from trees first. So Othniel Marsh was the first prominent evolutionist to propose that birds evolved from tree-dwelling animals. He was one of the two preeminent dinosaur fossil collectors early on, Othniel. So in 1890, he proposed that creatures had certain structural features that helped them make longer jumps between trees, then to gliding before flying evolved. And this is serious. Now, Alan Fiducia, mentioned him earlier, leading evolutionary paleontologist, and he is a prominent member of the Birds Are Not Dinosaurs group, or band. Fiducia acknowledges that dinosaurs could not have evolved into birds. As an evolutionist, he pushes the origin of dinosaurs further back in time to non-dinosaurian archosaurs. Archosaurs are a group that include crocodiles, birds, pterosaurs and dinosaurs, anything that they don't know the origin of, they just lump in one group and make out there's an ancestor there somewhere. Other staunch opponents of the dinosaur to bird theory include Larry Martin and Storrs Olson. Larry Martin was a vertebrate paleontologist and curator of the Natural History Museum and Biodiversity Research Centre in the University of Kansas. And Storrs Olson was curator of birds at the National Museum of Natural History, the very prestigious Smithsonian Institute there in Washington, D.C. And it's interesting because you go into a natural history museum or a museum and you will not find the alternate view. You will find very strongly birds are living dinosaurs. You will not find the other view, and yet these people were curators in these type of museums that they opposed that view, that they couldn't have evolved from dinosaurs. Now the third group, birds and dinosaurs were both created. So the third group are opposed to evolution of any sort, including dinosaurs evolving into birds. And Bible-believing Christian creationists are included in this group, but it's a diverse group. It includes some, and I say some, not all, but some, who are professing Jews, Muslims, evangelical Christians in a broader sense, Orthodox Christians, and from sects like particularly the Seventh-day Adventists. Now they believe that dinosaurs, birds and other life forms were created and coexisted from the creation week as unique entities as stated in the Bible. So we go to the creation, we go there to Genesis chapter 1. Birds and dinosaurs were created as unrelated animal kinds. Swimming and flying creatures, including flying birds, were created on day 5. Genesis 1, verses 20 to 23 reads, "And God said, Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creatures that have life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the 5th day." So then we go to dinosaurs. By definition, they're land animals, so they would have been created on day 6 of the creation week. Genesis 1, verses 24 and 25 states, "And God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind, and it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and God saw that it was good." It was good. But then we have corruption coming into the world. Birds and dinosaurs were affected by death and disease after the fall. So sin came into the world via Adam, the first man, and with that death as a consequence, as Romans 5 verse 12 states, "Wherefore as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned." So no death before sin. So Adam and Christ are the only perfect men who have ever walked this earth. Adam for a season, Christ for all eternity. And death and corruption then affected all mankind by inheritance through Adam, but all other life forms on earth have been affected. Romans 8:22 says, "For you know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now." And we see fossils because things die. And not only do we see fossils, but we see some fossils affected by the fall. We see disease represented in the fossil. We see cancers in leg bones of dinosaurs. Up there's a picture of, on the right-hand side, as you're looking at, is a normal bone of a lower leg bone for a dinosaur. And then this other one, which is a bit broken off, but it's got a big bulb in it. They've dissected that and looked at it through thin section. They've actually found cancer, bone cancer in it, cells of bone cancer. So that's a Centrosaurus, a plant-eating horned dinosaur, supposedly lived 70 to 77 million years ago, according to those people. But other forms have been found in cancers and growths and all sorts of other things in Tyrannosaurus rex bones and turtles and all sorts of things. The third major event was the catastrophe. Birds and dinosaurs were saved on Noah's Ark while many perished during the flood. And evidence, first of all, comes from the Bible. Birds and dinosaurs were created on days 5 and 6, respectively, as we've just said. And pairs of dinosaurs and birds with other land animals and flying animals entered the ark with Noah and his family before the flood came. And that comes out of Genesis 6, verses 6 to 9. We don't have time to read it, unfortunately. All other living dinosaurs were killed during the flood. Genesis 7, verse 21 and 22 is very clear that this was a global flood. This affected all living things that were not in the ark. And Genesis 7 there, 21 and 22 reads, "And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl and of cattle and of beast, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land died." It's very clear. All. It's not a little tiny local flood, it was a global flood. And dinosaurs lived after the flood. Behemoth is mentioned there in Job chapter 40. Verse 15 says, "Behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee. He eateth grass as an ox." This is God speaking to Job. And James Strong is not a fundamentalist at all, but he's, by and large, his concordance is very good. But he says there, Behemoth, and he defines it as a water ox or a hippopotamus. You go to Brown, Driver, Briggs, and their definition and their concordance, perhaps an extinct dinosaur, they say. A Diplodocus or a Brachiosaurus, like this fellow. Exact meaning unknown, correct. Exact meaning unknown is the reality. And and it has a note there, some translate as elephant or hippopotamus, but from the description in Job 40, this is patently absurd. Note also that the animal is a sauropod. It coexisted with people because God said to Job, "Made with thee," who coexisting. And it ate grass like an ox. Now, the evolutionists have a real problem with this. This can't be a dinosaur because dinosaurs died out 65 million years before man was ever on the earth, and 11 years before grass actually evolved. That was their thinking. Then they found a titanosaur and its droppings, fossilised droppings, examined them, it eats grass. I think it was 4 or 6 different varieties of grass and a couple of varieties of rice in its droppings. It ate grass. And so the evolutionists have to revise their time frame. Just because they don't have fossils, remember fossils formed under extremely unusual circumstances, they set their time frames from their false things, and of course they get it wrong. And everything it goes back further and further as they find more fossils. But certainly, dinosaurs ate grass, or some of them at least. And you go and read on in Job chapter 40, verses 16 onwards. "Lo now, his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. He moveth his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his stones are wrapped together. His bones are as strong pieces of brass. His bones are like bars of iron. He is the chief of the ways of God, etc. He moveth his tail like a cedar. If you look at a hippopotamus and elephant, they have little tiny tails. That's why those other people were saying it's absurd to say, like other people, that it was a hippopotamus. Or some of the modern translations, that's what they've done. Instead of using behemoth, they've called it a hippopotamus or an elephant. It doesn't make sense. And the thing about a dinosaur is its tail, as far as we know, didn't drag on the ground when it moved, because they've found in the bones where they anchor the tendons, it was so tight and so strong that this tail was very erect out sideways and helped the thing move. So this T-Rex model is not quite right, where it's, for convenience sake, it's resting on the ground to give it structural support. It walked like that, with its cedar-like tail, cedar tree-like tail out the back there. The other thing is, people ask the questions, how could dinosaurs fit on the ark? This thing is so huge, more than double the height of this roof here, and you've got a titanosaur or a brachiosaurus or something like that, and you think, this is the chief of God's ways, isn't it? Elephant's pretty impressive, a rhino's pretty impressive, but a dinosaur, that must be the chief of God's ways. So that makes sense. But how did they get on the ark? Well, the ark was big. You go to Genesis 6, 13 to 15, you read the dimensions. If you use the cubit, that's the cubit measure. If you use 18 inches or 45 centimetres, then you have enough there for 350 semi-trucks or trailers of trucks of room on that ark. If you use the royal cubit, which was a bit bigger, 20.4 inches or 52 centimetres, then you have the equivalent of about another 100 truckloads that you can fit in there. And the Hebrew royal cubit was the one that Answers in Genesis used when they built the life-size model in Kentucky, there in the United States, of Noah's Ark. And if I ever go to America, I'd like to go there and visit it, because it is huge. In the picture there, you've got people, you've got cars, you've got all sorts of things going down. You've even got a parade by the looks of it going past with all the people in the blue down the bottom left corner there. And when you get into that ark, you just see how much room there is. Enormous. So the ark was large. The next thing to say is the dinosaur numbers were limited. Two of each kind of dinosaur would have been on the ark. And there are more than 1,500 species of known dinosaurs. But a species and a kind are not the same. They are not the same. And creationists have determined that it was more like 60, maybe up to a maximum of 85 different kinds of dinosaurs. And that would mean Noah had to house and feed something like 120 to 170 dinosaurs on the ark. And there's plenty of room. The other thing is the dinosaurs were small, would have been small. Don't have to get fully grown ones. Fully grown ones might be the end of their reproductive cycle in any case. So you could have smaller ones, not quite that size, I wouldn't have thought. More like small, immature or mature but small, and remembering that all dinosaurs come from eggs as far as we know, and they weren't hard like bird eggs, they were more leathery. You can see this is a casting of some real ones out of Mongolia, and you can see how they're crushed in the process but not destroyed, and it was because they're leathery that they actually exist. But you can see the size of them. The biggest known dinosaur fossils are only the size of a football. So all of a sudden you have a dinosaur yay big starting its life, and somewhere between that and whatever, the Lord could have selected them and fitted them on the ark. The other evidence comes from archaeology. So we find, when we study human history from material remains, which is archaeology, we find plenty of evidence to say that dinosaurs were in existence with people, and people copied them, put them on pottery. We have the Ica stones with representations of dinosaurs and all sorts of things from Peru. Unfortunately, about the Ica stones, there's some definite fakes. People are making money out of fakes. And as soon as you put fakes in with real ones, it gets very confusing. So the evolutionists conveniently say, oh, it's non-evidence, it's faked. Or we can't tell the age of these things. You can tell the age of a rock according to evolution, but you can't tell the age of something with a design on it. So these were from the 1500s they started to collect these, well before dinosaurs were even known about. Temple carving in Cambodia, I forget the age, whether it was 900 years old or whether it was 900 AD, I forget which it was, but many, many hundreds of years ago, it looks like a Stegosaurus on there. And then you have, over in North America, you have like sauropod type engravings from the American Indian. All of these are many hundreds of years before dinosaurs were even thought about. So evidence that dinosaurs and people existed. Go to China and you'll find Chinese culture has a lot of depictions of dragons, remembering dinosaurs were called dragons originally. And dinosaurs have been seen on drawings from the Shang dynasty, which ran between 1766 and 1122 BC. So you've got a Saurolophus over here in a picture, very clear, the horned dinosaur, the only honking dinosaur that they believe. And you also have carvings in jade. Jade was a great material for carving, and this one is like the Ceratosaurus from about 2000 BC. So there's plenty of evidence that people had very fertile imaginations, not lightly, or else they actually lived at the same time as dinosaurs and copied their pictures. Now, the other form of evidence comes from paleontology, the study of fossils, and we have bones, teeth, skin of dinosaurs, actual skin, no feathers on them, that would have died during the flood, and we find their footprints preserved in rocks and graveyards throughout the world. So this one was my latest acquisition. This one's one of my more expensive fossils, so it's in a little case. This one's a gralator. Gralators are found on every continent of the world. So these little dinosaurs roamed all over the place, only about 3 foot high or about 1 metre high. And the typical footprint of a theropod, the 3 toes showing up on those. But it also shows that originally the landmass in the world was all one, and that they could just migrate all over the world. The Spinosaurus tooth, that Spinosauruses, you find them like a gralator in Australia, you find them in many places throughout the world. They moved around. Others, like a T-Rex, you find more localised. But some of the dinosaurs had the ability to roam the whole world, or breed like rabbits, start one place and cover the earth. How many rabbits do you need to cover Australia? about 11 pairs or something, wasn't it, in those naughty people who brought them originally? Right, now the other evidence comes from biology to support that birds and dinosaurs are quite distinct entities. They certainly have one head, two eyes, one mouth. They stand on two legs, most of them. They lay eggs, very different type of eggs, but they do. But the reality is that many other animals share those features. Not so many lay eggs, but we've got some unique creatures in Australia that are mammals that lay eggs. But they have significant biological differences, and they relate to three things that I'm going to look at just briefly. Air circulation, how they breathe, locomotion, how they move, and flight. So if we look at the first of those, air circulation, we see that theropod lungs are reptilian and act like bellows, like ours. Air is breathed in, and the blood vessels in the sacs in the lungs take up oxygen and release carbon dioxide and water. The unused air is then breathed out the same way it came in. So the dinosaurs breathe like we did, or they did breathe like us. Birds have a much more complicated system that uses air sacs and hollow bones. This system keeps air flowing in one direction. And these tubes, called parabronchi, in the lungs, they have blood vessels alongside of them, and the blood moves in the opposite direction, so you get a maximum exchange of oxygen between the blood and the lungs, oxygen and carbon dioxide as gases. So very, very different air circulation, and there is nothing known that is intermediate to that. Then on locomotion, moving. Theropods walk or run on two legs that pivot at the pelvis, like us. A little bit different in the way they do it, but they still have a pelvis, they have knees like us, they have ankles. The overall structure allows the thigh to move, the knee to bend, and the ankle to bend like a hinge. So they don't have the same motion as we do, but basically they move at the same joints. Thick toes help support the weight of the dinosaur and leave that in a theropod, the three-toed mark in the mud. It got fossilised. Now, when we come to birds, they have a fixed thigh bone, which provides rigid support for the air sacs. So if the thigh moved, the bird would rip its lungs open. So the thigh bone is in the body, it's hidden, and it can't move. It's immobilised because it's part of helping the breathing system with its support. So any intermediate between a dinosaur and bird would have ripped its lungs open and died and not got anywhere. So it's an impossibility. Now, what appears to be the bird's knees to us when you first look at it is actually the equivalent of our ankle. So it bends backwards rather than forwards, because that's what happens with our ankle. And that enables many birds to produce a footprint with 3 toes forward, 1 backward. Not all do the same, but you get a very different type of footprint that comes out of it all. But there's no possibility of going, really, when you think of it, from going from one type to the other. And there's certainly no intermediates anywhere. The third thing is about flight. Theropods have 2 forearms that were not capable of flight or gliding. T-Rex would agree with me, I'm sure. Birds have wings instead of forearms, and the shape of the wing overcomes gravity by producing lift, such as an airfoil sort of design that we see on aeroplanes. And a flapping action supported by a pulley system enables the bird to move forwards. And the supracoracoides muscle pulls on its tendon, which winds around a pulley composed of the coracoid and clavicle bones. And the tendon is anchored to the humerus wing bone. We see nothing like this in a dinosaur. And that's why the bone in the middle is very strong on a bird, because it has to, because it's got all this motion on it, whereas a dinosaur doesn't have to do that. And feathers, they're essential for flight for a bird. Richard Dawkins states in Climbing Mount Improbable, feathers are modified reptilian scales. However, scales are folds in the skin. They're just skin folded over, that's a scale. Whereas feathers are complex structures with barbules and hooks that originate in a totally different way from follicles inside the skin in a manner akin to mammalian hair when it comes out through follicles. And with the barbules hooked, the wing has a lightweight, flat surface that the birds use to push against the air and to fly. And so a lot of birds, a lot of their preening is actually rearranging those barbules to actually hook the feathers together. Otherwise, when they try to take off, all their feathers will separate and they can't fly. So it's a very complex structure that certainly there's no indication of that in dinosaurs. Now, the question is though, did any dinosaurs already have feathers? So Brenda Guberson states in her book, Feathered Dinosaurs, feathers are incredible for many reasons. Perhaps the most fascinating thing about them is that dinosaurs, even ones that could not fly, I'm not sure which dinosaurs could, but even ones that could not fly had feathers. That's her statement. The National Dinosaur Museum at Canberra, quite impressive, but very evolutionary focused, says, feathers appeared throughout many dinosaurs. Theropod dinosaurs such as Velociraptor and Deinonychus evolved feathers from a simple filamentous covering at least by the late Jurassic. And it's easy to say those things, to claim that they had feathers, but the evidence is actually missing totally. Now, if you go to the claims of feathered dinosaurs, you find this one, Sinosauropteryx, means Chinese dragon wing. It was first discovered in northeastern China in 1996 and claimed to be a feathered dinosaur. John Rubin found the dinosaur had bellow-like lungs of reptiles, so it didn't have bird lungs at all. And another bird, Archaeonyctus, lived at a similar time according to the fossils, was found with fully developed bird lung and digestive system. So Sinosauropteryx was a dinosaur when birds already existed in the fossil record. So it doesn't show up anything of evolution here or an ancestor. And the vague fuzziness along the back of a Sinosauropteryx fossil was interpreted as proto-feathers. So we're talking about this, and they called it dino fuzz, these little funny things here, and maybe a bit here. So this is the only evidence they put forward as dinosaurs with feathers. So this dino fuzz regarded as proof that dinosaurs had evolved into birds. The authors described the dino fuzz as resembling modern bird feathers. Well, we can look at it and it doesn't quite look like modern bird feathers. Now, in 2007, Alan Fiducia and Lingam Solia studied these integumentary structures in more detail. They concluded that the feathery structures were not hollow, as feathers are on birds, and were not feathers. Instead, they were found to be identical to partly decayed collagen fibres in skin. Fiducia noted that the so-called feathers of Sinosauropteryx were not even on the surface of the creature, but were inside the confines of the body. So it's hard to see, but the body of that tail, the outline runs out on the outside, and these funny structures are inside. They're not even outside the body, whereas feathers are always outside the body. So the researchers followed up the study by doing something. What did they do? They buried carcasses of dolphins and sharks. I've never seen one with a feather on, but they buried these carcasses, and guess what they found? Dinosaur fuzz. It's just collagen in the skin is just decayed and produced this dinosaur fuzz. So this dinosaur fuzz is not actually feathers at all. There's nothing to do with it. There's no feathered dinosaurs is the reality. Not one feathered dinosaur. Now, Archaeoraptor. According to Safati and Tay in their very good book, there has only ever been one candidate where a fossil has been shown to include a mix of dinosaur and bird traits. The fossil was called Archaeoraptor. In 1999, National Geographic reported that they have found the missing link, a dinosaur with pennaceous feathers, that is, feathers characterised by a central barb with asymmetrical veins, meaning flight feathers. The finding was attacked as shameless sensationalism by Storrs Olsen in an open letter that he wrote to the scientific community. And Shuxing, who supposedly has found more dinosaurs with feathers than anyone else, exposed it as a fraud. To the embarrassment of National Geographic. What people had done was stuck a tail on a bird. A dinosaur tail, not even a bird tail, on a bird, and they proved it was false and a fraud, and so National Geographic had egg on their face. And when the fossils get examined, we find no animal that is intermediate between the theropods and the birds. There's nothing that bridges. When you do what Safati and Tay did, they had dinosaur-only traits here, bird-only traits. They sorted the fossils available as candidates and they went into one group. Most were birds. One was a dinosaur. There was nothing in the middle that had anything that related only to a dinosaur or only to a bird, nothing shared at all. So there is nothing, and the only ever thing that looked like it had some transitional form was shown to be a fraud, Archaeoraptor. So the reality is no dinosaurs have ever had feathers. And there's no evidence that birds have ever evolved from dinosaurs. And therefore, we need to beware of the philosophy that's out there, and we need to guard our children, we need to guard ourselves, we need to guard other people, because no matter what other people are saying, there is no evidence at all that birds are living dinosaurs. Let's pray. Father, we do thank you for this day. We thank you for your goodness to us, and we thank you for the truth of the Word of God. We thank you that it is true from all eternity and forever. We thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.